The House of Red Strings. In a certain provincial city in China, there was a rumor about an abandoned house known as the House of Red Strings. It was said that anyone who stepped inside would encounter strange phenomena and never return, and if they did, they were no longer the same, no longer themselves. Shota, a university student, had a hobby of investigating urban legends. That day, he invited his friends Ren and Yuji to explore the infamous House of Red Strings. It's just superstition, right? And what's with the red strings anyway? You'll see when we get there. The locals refused to tell them where the house was, but after gathering information online, they finally pinpointed its location. That night, they arrived at the outskirts of town, where the abandoned house stood. It was a 2-story wooden structure. The walls were blackened with age, and the roof tiles were crumbling. But the most unsettling part was the red strings wrapped tightly around the front door handle. Some kind of prank, Ren muttered. Without hesitation, Shota pushed the door open. At that moment, the door silently shut behind them. Inside, the house was surprisingly well preserved. Dust covered the furniture, but everything else remained intact, as if frozen in time. See? Just another abandoned house. Yuji laughed as he walked further in, but Shota quickly noticed something strange. Red strings were tangled throughout the house. They hung from the ceiling, crawled along the floor, and wove through the gaps between furniture. This is unsettling, Ren muttered. Just then, creak. A sound came from upstairs. Someone's here? The three of them exchanged glances before cautiously ascending the staircase. At the end of the second-floor hallway, there was a single door, and in front of it, layers upon layers of red strings were woven tightly together. Looks like a warning, Yuji whispered, but Shota ignored it and reached out, pushing through the strings to open the door. Inside, there was nothing. Just an empty room. What the hell? Nothing here? At that moment, bam! The door slammed shut. Hey, cut it out! Shota grabbed the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. It won't open? Ren and Yuji panicked, pushing from the other side. Something's blocking it. But the door showed no visible signs of obstruction. Only the red strings trembled slightly, as if something inside the room had moved. Shota swallowed hard, and then something shifted behind him. Shota, open the door! Ren and Yuji pounded on the door, but Shota couldn't move. Something was behind him. He must not turn around. His instincts screamed it, yet his legs trembled, and then something soft brushed against his neck, a red string. In that instant, his vision was swallowed by crimson. The next morning, Ren and Yuji had fled the house, leaving Shota behind. They called the police and returned to the site, but the house was gone. All that remained was an empty, barren lot. No, it was here. Just last night. Ren's voice wavered. At their feet, a single red string lay in the dirt, and slowly it moved, as if something was still there. The Foggy Graveyard. In a remote part of England, there was a legend about a graveyard that must never be entered at night. Those who stepped inside were said to never return, and if they did, they were no longer the same. Alex, a university history major, was researching old graveyards. That day, he and his friends Lucas and Emily visited an ancient cemetery deep in the countryside. During the daytime, The graveyard seemed ordinary. Rows of weathered tombstones stood in eerie silence. "So this is the haunted cemetery? Looks pretty normal to me." Lucas shrugged. "But the locals refuse to go near it," Emily murmured. They casually walked among the graves, taking photos and jotting down notes. Then, just as the sun began to set, something changed. A thick fog rolled in. It came unnaturally fast, swallowing the entire graveyard within seconds. "What the hell? This fog came out of nowhere." Lucas sounded uneasy. "Where's the exit?" Emily turned around frantically. But the path they had come from was gone. The once visible trail leading out of the cemetery had vanished into the mist. "This way!" Alex pushed forward, trying to navigate through the grave markers. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath his feet felt strange. It was too soft, as if something was shifting below. And then, knock, knock. A hollow sound echoed through the fog. "Did you hear that?" Lucas's voice trembled. No one answered, but the sound continued. Knock, knock. Someone, or something, was tapping on a tombstone. No, it wasn't someone. From within the fog, figures began to appear. Shadowy, indistinct forms rising from behind the graves. Oh my God. Alex felt his breath hitch. The figures were walking toward them. But something was wrong. None of them had faces. Their heads were blurred, as if swallowed by the fog itself. Emily let out a choked scream. "Run!" Alex shouted. The three of them sprinted through the cemetery. But there was no exit. "This graveyard isn't that big. We should have reached the edge by now." Lucas panted, but no matter how far they ran, the tombstones never ended. The graveyard itself was changing. And then they saw it. The same tombstone they had passed minutes ago. "We're going in circles," Lucas whispered in horror. Just then, Emily froze. "Guys, look." She raised a trembling hand, pointing into the fog. Beyond the mist, a person stood among the graves. They wore the same clothes as Alex and the others, but they had no face. Just a hollow, shapeless void where their features should have been. The figure took a step forward. The next thing they knew, they were outside the cemetery. The morning sun had risen, and the fog was gone. "We made it back?" Lucas asked in disbelief. Emily, still shaking, nodded. Alex turned back toward the graveyard. It looked normal, just an ordinary cemetery. Was it all just a dream? Then, Alex's eyes widened. For a brief moment, his shadow moved in the wrong direction. Since that night, Alex never walked outside when it was foggy, because sometimes in the mist, he could feel someone watching him. Chapter 4. The Hands from Below. In a remote region of Germany, there was a legend about a forbidden basement, a place no one should ever descend into. Those who stepped inside were said to never return, and if they did, they were no longer themselves. Marcus, an architect specializing in historical restoration, had been assigned to renovate an old manor. Built in the 18th century, the mansion was a grand stone structure, but it had been abandoned for years. Its halls were empty, its walls crumbling. It's incredible that a place like this still stands. Marcus walked through the corridors, making notes on his plans for renovation. Then, after some time, he noticed something odd. There was no entrance to the basement. A building of this size should have a basement, perhaps a storage space or a wine cellar. Strange. Checking the old blueprints, he found something chilling. The mansion was supposed to have a basement. Yet, no entrance existed. He searched for a while until he finally found it. A hidden door. Behind a dusty bookshelf, a small wooden door was wedged into the stone wall. Why is this here? He pressed against it. Creak. The rusty hinges groaned as the door slowly opened. Beyond it, a dark stairwell leading downward. The stairs were far deeper than he expected. Broken lamps lined the walls, long since extinguished. Marcus switched on his flashlight and carefully descended. The air grew unnaturally cold. What is this chill? At the bottom, he stepped into a vast underground chamber, and then he saw it. The walls were covered in handprints. Hundreds of them, scratched, carved, and etched deep into the stone. Some were large, others small. They overlapped and intertwined like desperate claw marks. What the hell? Marcus reached out and touched the wall. At that moment, something touched him back. He yanked his hand away. But no one was there, or so he thought, until he noticed the floor. It moved, a subtle, pulsing shift beneath his feet. I need to get out of here. His instincts screamed at him. Marcus turned toward the stairs, but then, rustle, rustle. The handprints on the walls began to move. No way. And then, hands began crawling out of the stone. This can't be real. Marcus staggered backward. Withered, skeletal hands dragged themselves out of the walls, reaching for him. I have to get out. He bolted for the stairs, but the staircase was gone. Where there had been stone steps just moments ago, now there was only a smooth black wall. No way out. This is impossible. He pounded on the wall, desperate. Then a whisper slithered through the air. You belong here now. Scrape, scrape. The hands moved closer. No, stay away. Marcus stumbled back. Then he realized his legs wouldn't move. Looking down, his blood ran cold. The hands were gripping his ankles. Let go, he screamed, but slowly. They pulled him into the wall. The next morning, the mansion's caretaker arrived for an inspection. Marcus, where are you? There was no sign of him. Only the hidden door. Behind the bookshelf, slightly ajar. Curious, the caretaker peered inside. But there was no stairwell. Only a blank stone wall. Strange. As he turned to leave, he failed to notice something. A fresh handprint had appeared on the wall, the size of Marcus's hand.